Blog Talk Radio.
Me chamo Afurakanu Afuraitkaitnut Neye AKANFO NANASOM Da Medinde Ojirafo Kwesi Radhen Pata Akan Akwamumai na Maruka Etipi Mu Ojirafo Ojiramain Mu. Greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is AKANFO NANASOM Day, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Radhen Pata Akan, Ojirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojiramai, the purified nation, Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning in to the broadcast. We're opening up the chat room. If you have any questions or comments, if you'd like to interact in the chat room, you log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. For those who are new to the broadcast, we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have AKANFO NANASOM, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion on Joda on Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of Ancestral Religion of Nanasom, first and foremost, because we are Akan, secondly, because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akan Ancestral Religion, culture, cosmology, ritual practice, and so forth, not only from individuals in the Western Hemisphere, but also those on the continent of Afuraikai, who have been infected with white culture, pseudo-religion, and so forth, and therefore their infection manifests through their presentation of the culture. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akan Ancestral Religion going back to our ancestral origins. That's ancient Khanat, ancient so-called Nubia, a title of ancient Nubia's Khanat, the Khan land, first land, foremost land, land of the beginning, and so forth. Our people migrated from ancient Khanat west to the western part of the continent after the fall of Kamit in northern Khanat, northern Nubia, and so forth. We reestablished Akan civilization in the western part of the continent, the Empire of Khanat, or the Empire of Ghana, a couple of thousand years ago. After Muslim invasions, some of our people migrated further south to the regions of contemporary Côte d'Ivoire and the Republic of Ghana, reestablished Akana civilization in the forest belt regions and savanna regions. Hundreds of years later, some of our people were forced from those regions into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. And this is how we ended up in the Western Hemisphere. We maintained our ancestral religious practices upon our arrival in the Western Hemisphere, and we were empowered and guided by our ancestral religious practices, the Abosom and Nsamanfo, the deities, ancestral spirits of our direct blood circles, to wage war against the whites and their offspring, force the end of enslavement through warfare in the Western Hemisphere. Akan ancestral religion is called Winti in Suriname in South America. It is called Obia in Jamaica. It is called Hoodoo in North America. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion on Joda Monday nights. On Benada, Abinada, Tuesday nights, we have Ojira, which means purification. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. In the language of ancient Khanit and Kamit, it also has those same definitions in the Akan language. We deal with ancestral religion in general on the Ojira broadcast, not just the Akan expression, but ancestral religion in general. No matter where we find ourselves as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the world, we show our ancestral religion no matter what form it takes, whether it's on the continent Afuraka, Afuraikai, or in the Western Hemisphere's Juju, which is Yoruba tradition in North America, Hoodoo, which is the Akan tradition in North America, Voodoo, which is the Ebe and Bone traditions in North America, Wanga, which is the Ovambo tradition in North America, and so forth, and Gengan, which is the Fang tradition in North America. Whatever form ancestral religion takes, it impacts every aspect of our lives. In essence, Ancestral Religion, which we call Nanasom, Afuraitkaitnit, African Ancestral Religion, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, these are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. We say that Ojira, purification, operationalizes Nanasom. Purification operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating divine law and ritually restoring divine balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions. Key to us executing our culture, functioning in harmony with divine order as we execute our divine function in creation that's given to us by Nyamewa, Amenet, Amen, the Supreme Being. Our ancestral culture, way of life, as Afuraitkaitnit people, is the divine acceptance, the law or love of divine order, and divine rejection, the hatred, the repulsion of disorder and its purveyors. In order to divinely accept, attune ourselves to the law, love, divine order, and engage the repulsion, the rejection of disorder and its purveyors on a consistent basis, we engage that ritual process. We execute our divine function in creation. We operate through life. When we make legitimate mistakes, we engage that ritual process of ritually incorporating divine law and ritually restoring divine balance so that we can realign ourselves with divine order, so that we can align every thought, every intention, every action, every moment of every day with divine order. That is our culture. That is our ancestral religion, impacts every aspect of our lives. So this is what we deal with on Ojira Purification Day, which is on Benada Abnada Tuesday nights. On Awukuda Akuada Wednesday nights, we have Egua Marketplace Day. We showcase Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who are serving the Afuraitkaitnit community in a positive capacity, those who maintain their ancestral religious values in the process of that service, and therefore that those values inform their service to the community. So we've had a number of businesses and organizations and institutions come on to the show. We also deal with, on that show, the philosophical foundation for economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. We thus have published the Okom Economic Development Model, which is an economic development model based and rooted in our ancestral religious values, which you can download, of course, for free from the site. On Yauda, Thursday nights, which is also Yada Abada, we have Amain Sim, Affairs of the Nation. We deal specifically with our issues as Afuraitkaitnit people within Ojira Man, the purified Ojira, Omain, nation, mine, land of the west, the setting sun. So Ojira Man is the purified nation in the west. That is our designation for Afuraitkaitnit people, African black people in the Western Hemisphere, descendant of those of our ancestral blood circles who were forced into the Western Hemisphere, but those who maintained our ancestral religious traditions, waged war against the whites in our spring, and forced the end of enslavement. We have coalesced in this region of the Earth Mother's body. We have been directed by our ancestresses and ancestors to blend ancestral blood circles in this specific region. We've learned to interface with this region of the Earth Mother. In this region of her body, we have manifest and interface with the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, as they manifest in their unique expressions in this region of the Earth Mother's body. We have dealt with plant life, animal life, mineral life, and incorporated that into our body through food and medicine and so forth from this region of the Earth Mother's body. So that confluence of activity has forged a locative identity whereby we have blended ancestral blood circles in a certain region of the Earth Mother's body and interface with the Abosom and plant life, animal life, and mineral life. We forged a unique identity with our own energetic expression. We recognize that an Omain, a nation, is a living, breathing entity just like an organ, which is governed by a specific abosom, orisha, voodoo, and so forth. We as cells within that organal structure, we must function harmoniously with one another, but at the same time support the entity of which we are a component of. So when we have that understanding, we approach life from a holistic perspective and specifically a nationist perspective. We deal with Amaniye nationism, which is the purification of nationalism, understanding a nation to be a living, breathing entity governed by abosom, orisha, voodoo, and we execute our function as cells within that organ, but also as the collective within a certain region governed by specific energy complexes, and we can solve our problems in a harmonious fashion from that nationist perspective. So we deal with those kinds of issues, affairs of the nation, whatever issues are confronting our people politically, socially, economically, and so forth. We approach them from an Amaniye or nationist perspective. So again, tonight is AKANFO NANASOM, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion. The subject for tonight is ADURUHYE, ADEBISA, Mummification and Divination from Khanit to Hoodoo. So we're going to put some links in the chat room right quick for a couple of our publications. One of them is our book, Khanit and Kamit, The Black Nation and Divinity. We have the direct link for the ebook version of that. We're also going to put our Hoodoo People book in the chat room. Hoodoo People, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, Africans in North America, Akan, Custodians of Hoodoo, from ancient Hoodoo, Udunu land, Khanit, Nubia. That book is placed in the chat room. And we also have our article from our WordPress site, our Ojira-Sem site, Matters of Purification, Ojira-Sem, that is our WordPress blog site, WordPress blog site. And the particular blog we're going to place in the chat room, the name of it is AGYENGYENSU, Dragonfly and Divination in Hoodoo. So we're going to place that link as well. All right. So those are in the chat room. And again, for those, if you're in the chat room, you want to make a comment, you must log in as a user. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, you have to hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. Okay. So we want to deal with this nature and function of mummification in relation to divination. The ritual mummification of the spirit and body and its role in oracular divination is part of the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit Ancestral Religious continuum from ancient Khanit and Kamit, Nubia and Egypt, to Hoodoo, Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. So first we're going to go to our publication, our book, Hoodoo People, and we're going to go to a specific section dealing with this notion of embalming and mummification and so forth, and we're going to bring it into context. If you look on page 14, you scroll down to page 14, we show some of the Medutu in ancient Kemet, the hieroglyphs in ancient Kemet. As we show earlier in the book, first and foremost, the term Hoodoo in North America comes from the Akan term Ndu. In the Akwamu dialect, the term is Ndu. In the Asante dialect, it's Nduru. But in the Akwamu dialect, it's Ndu, which means medicine, medicine from roots, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit, to bring the spirit down through ritual possession, spirit communication. When you become heavy with the spirit descends, alights upon you, it descends upon you, become heavy with the spirit and so forth. So Undu also means that heavy feeling and so forth. So we show not only does it mean that in the Akan language, Undu meaning medicine and so forth, it also means to become heavy with the spirit. In ancient Kemet, the language of Kemet and Kanat, Undu means medicine from plant life and trees and so forth. it also means to become heavy or heaviness. Same term. Now, but we go further, not only does it mean that, it also means ritual offerings placed on a shrine for the divinities and ancestral spirits. In fact, we show that. Let's get down to that portion first, and then we'll go back up to page 14. If you go down to page 18, we show the Medutu for that. And we show the transliteration. We show a couple of excerpts from the instruction of Ani from the Papyrus Bulak, number 4. This is one of the many sets of instructions or maxims referred to as the wisdom literature in Ancient Kemet. The copy of this work is dated to the 21st dynasty in Kemet, but the composition is shown to have been in the 18th dynasty, approximately 3,500 years ago. So we show the Medutu, we show the transliteration, and then we show the English translation. The English translation is when making ritual offerings to the Abosom, to the deity, to the Ntoro, the Neter, the deity, you are invoking, guard against offering that which he detests, which the deity detests. The actual transliteration is Undun Ntoroku Sao Tu Erna Betal Tuf, which means when offering to the deity, you guard against, that which the deity abominates. But the portion that says offerings or offering to the deity, the offering is Ndu, also spelled Nduru. Just like in Asante, the term is Nduru, which is the medicine, the ritual medicine. In Akwamu, it's Ndu. You have both versions in Ancient Kemet, Ndu as well as Nduru. In this version, it's Nduru. That's the ritual offerings. Then we go down to the next piece on page 19. In the Medutu, we have the actual Medutu, the transliteration, translation. It says the sanctuary of the Ntoro, the deity, detest this too much speaking. Make prayers, invocations. In fact, that's the direct transliteration. Let me give the translation first, and then we'll go back to the transliteration. The deity, the Ntoro, detests too much idle speaking in his shrine. Make your prayers, invocations with a heart which is lawful or quote-unquote loving, whose invocations are internal and not boastful. The Ntoro, the deity, will attend to the work you are doing ritually, hear that which you have inquired about, and accept your offerings, accept your ritual offerings. The key here is that when it says accept your ritual offerings, those ritual offerings are called the Ndunu or the Undu. The ritual offerings are called the Undu, which we say the Hoodoo. When you give your Hoodoo, your ritual offerings to the deity, then the deity responds in a harmonious way. When you offer, make sure you give offerings or Undu that are not detested or out of harmony with the nature of the divinity. So we show that piece just to bring home that point that Undu not only means medicine, plant life, and so forth, and also means to become heavy with the spirit. It also means ritual offerings. It means that in the language of Ancient Kemet. It means that in Akan, and we've retained those exact same meanings in the Hoodoo tradition in North America. Hoodoo or Undu means medicine from plants, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy. It also is a term used describing ritual offerings. I've given my Hoodoo, I placed the Hoodoo on the shrine. I've given the Hoodoo or the medicine to the person. It's used as a noun, it's used as a verb, and so forth, as well as an adjective. Now, let's go back up to page 14 to get directly to what we're talking about. We show the Medutu referring to mummification, embalming, and so forth. So now we get to the term ut or utu, to tie up, to swab, to wind bandages around the dead body, to mummify, to embalm. Utu, embalmer. Another definition, the uti is also an embalmed body. Utiu, plural. Utu, the coffin, mummy case, and so forth. So we have, once again, the same term dealing with that which is tied up, that which is bound, that which is mummified, that which is embalmed, this entity that has been preserved, packaged, and so forth. And it's called Untu, something that's wrapped up, preserved, and utilized for a ritual purpose. And as you can see where we're going with that, of course, when we deal with various forms of hoodoo, like the mojo, which comes from moja and akan, or the jack, which comes from ja and akan, these ritual implements that are bound up, tied up, and so forth, and used for ritual purposes. This goes all the way back to ancient Kemet, when the body itself is embalmed, tied up, preserved for ritual purposes. So we say here on page 14, as we can see, the mummification of the dead body, and the title of the mummifier or embalmer is Utu, etc., Utu, etc., in ancient Kemet, as well as Akan culture in West Africa, Afuraitkaitnit, Africa, and in Hoodoo in North America. The individual who prepares the body of the deceased is a ritual specialist who also communicates with the spirit of the deceased individual. This is conjure, and of course, conjure comes from the Akan term. When we utilize that term as a title of the religion, we call it hoodoo. We also call it conjure. Hoodoo comes from Undu and Akan. Conjure comes from Kanche and Akan, and Kanche became Kanje. And then the whites and offspring assumed we were saying conjure. We were saying kanje or kanche. Ka means to speak, utter, to say or tell. Che means to make something come forth, as in the coming forth of the sun, that means the spirits come forth. Kanche is a term that means to utter incantations to make the deities and the ancestral spirits come forward, ritually. So we call the tradition Kanche or Kanje, later conjure, Undu, later hoodoo, and so forth. Communicating with that deceased individual when you're preparing the body, preserving the body, and so forth ritually, this is conjure. The embalming of the dead has always been a priestly function, as well as a priestessly function. In North America, our people in the late 19th and early 20th centuries Gregorian calendar would often bury our deceased relatives directly under the floor of our homes. We would also have cemeteries in our yards. And this includes, in my family, for example, that's something that took place, burying the deceased under the floors of the homes. The individuals who prepared the bodies were those who were able to communicate with, evoke, conjure the spirit of the deceased relative. Offerings would be given to the ancestral spirit as well as prayers, so that the newly departed, now ancestral spirit would take those prayers to the Supreme Being, as well as our other ancestresses and ancestors who had gone on before the recently deceased. The messages and offerings, the hoodoo that the newly departed spirit would receive from the surviving family, and we show here in the book Udu, also means ancestral offering table, and the offerings placed on the offering table in the language of ancient Kemet is called Udhu. And of course, we call the offerings, the ritual offerings we give the hoodoo to the spirits, the exact same terminology. So the messages and offerings, Udu, that the newly departed spirit would receive from the surviving family would be delivered to the ancestral community once that spirit made his or her journey to the ancestral village and became seated, grounded, duru, because duru also means to become heavy, become grounded, and so forth. Once they became seated or grounded there, as opposed to becoming an earthbound spirit who hangs around the place where he or she died and spiritually harasses the living. When someone is grounded, spiritually grounded, their spirit has weight. They say this, sum sum ye duru, the spirit, sum sum ye is duru, heavy, has weight, has grounding, has substance. You have a heavy spirit in the sense, meaning strong, stout. Your spirit has weight, you're grounded. You're not light and flighty and just can be pulled in all different directions. You are anchored or grounded. So they say sum sum ye duru, the spirit is heavy, meaning it's strong, powerful. When someone has a strong spirit, then they become seated or grounded in the ancestral community. They're not just hanging around the place where they died and just pulled in different directions, aimlessly wandering and no control over themselves. They become grounded. And that's when they communicate our prayers and our offerings, to the ancestral community after they made that journey to the ancestral realm and become seated there after their transition. In our Akan tradition, after about 40 days. And they become fully grounded within a year after their transition. This continues today. It also mirrors the practice of our Akan people in Afuraitkaitnit, the proof of the connection from Kamit to Akanfo and West Afuraitkaitnit, of course, is not only manifest in the ritual practices, but also the language. So when you look in the Akan language, Aduru or Nduru or Ndu She, the act of embalming a corpse. Aduru She or Du She, the act of embalming a corpse. The term She means to fix, arrange. This is in the Akan language. While the term Aduru or Duru is that which is heavy, weighty. This is the Ndu or mummy in Kamit. The Nduru, medicine, used on the corpse is what makes the body hard and heavy. We thus have the term chain duru, the hardening. Chain means hard. Chain means hard. And nduru, medicine or drug or mummification. So in the Akan language, chain duru means the hard nduru, the hard medicine. That is a drug for hardening anything, for embalming a corpse, for mummification. It's the hardening ndu, the hardening medicine. So the undu, or mummy in ancient Kemet, is the heavy, weighty, hard, encrusted, or crystallized, mummified body, which becomes the greatest ancestral shrine. And of course, the term for ancestral shrine is Udunu in ancient Kemet as well, for communication with the deceased. So again, the hardened body, once the body is prepared ritually, the fluids are taken out, the organs of the viscera are taken out, and then the body is preserved and is hardened, it's mummified and so forth. Medicine is used in natron and so forth. In ancient Kemet, this mummy, this Udunu, the mummy itself is called the Udunu, is a heavy, weighty, hard, Udunu, encrusted or crystallized, mummified body, which becomes the greatest ancestral shrine for communication with the deceased. When we grow and develop, in our culture, we talk about birth, growth, development, full flowering of the person, just like, the life cycle of a plant and so forth. The person is fully flowered, fully developed and so forth. And then they start moving towards, and so for example, birth is like sunrise, then the peak, as you're going towards, the peak of development, you're growing and developing and so forth, then you reach the peak, which is like noon, high point of the day, just like the summer solstice, the high point of the year, the highest point in the sky that the sun reaches. That's the full development of the individual. Fully flowering, fully formed, fully manifesting their power and influence and so forth. But then once that peak is reached, then the solar energy begins to decrease and the sun begins to move towards the setting phase and crossing into the quote-unquote underworld and going to the underworld and so forth, passing below the horizon. As the solar energy begins to decrease, then we start moving towards quote-unquote older age, eldership. We start slowing down and moving a little bit slower and so forth until we get to the point where we make our transition and the body fully slows down to the point where it stops. Of course, death occurs and the spirit separates from the body, and the body is mummified, preserved, embalmed and so forth, buried in the ground and so forth, and then the spirit transitions to the ancestral realm. In our culture, after the full development of the individual and they start moving towards the ancestral phase, the whites and offspring would say the person is beginning to decay. The slowing down for them is a decaying. In our culture, it's not a decaying. In our culture, when the slowing down begins to happen, the person is moving towards not only elderhood and elderesshood, but they're also moving towards ancestorhood and ancestresshood. That also means they are becoming crystallized. They are becoming a crystal. The body is becoming crystallized. And by the time they reach death, transition through the gateway of the male and female force of death, Owuo, Bedima, and Owuo, Ba, the male and female force of death that expands that contractive force on the male and female side, then the body itself is preserved as a quote-unquote hoodoo talisman. It's fashioned into a crystal and mummified. It becomes the greatest crystal, just like we use crystals to receive energy, hold on to energy, and process energy, and project energy for protection as well as healing and so forth. Just like someone uses a laser and so forth to project energy, we use crystals for that reason. In the same fashion, crystals are portable shrines, no different than a shrine in your house on the floor on a table. A crystal is a portable shrine. It's a magnifier of the energy of the Abosom and Nananoma and Samanfa we've talked about in the past. This notion of shrines as magnifiers of the energy of a divinity or an ancestral spirit. A crystal is a portable shrine that receives and retains energy so that it can be later used, projected for protection as well as for healing. The physical body of the individual, that body within which the individual spirit took up residence for a number of decades before they transitioned, that body, when preserved, crystallized, embalmed and so forth, mummified, it becomes a large crystal. It becomes the greatest, most powerful magnifier of that individual spirit's energy possible. Of course, you can draw a picture of the individual or have a photo of the individual. You can have a sculpture for the individual, but the most powerful, intense shrine, ancestral shrine for the individual is literally the body they used to inhabit. So we preserve that body as a crystal. It crystallizes, it hardens and so forth. We preserve it, and we utilize it as a magnifier for the energy of the spirit. So we have an intense communication with that spirit, where that energy is magnified in a very intense fashion during ancestral ritual communication. So this is the reason we engage in mummification. This is the reason that we don't engage in cremation. There's a reason why this is the reason why we preserve the body. This is, something that Egyptologists could not give you an answer for. They don't have that experience of crystallizing a body and utilizing that crystallized body in a ritual fashion, magnifying the energy of the ancestral spirit. So we go through that information here, and then the next portion is, as we said, ADURUHYE or Ndushe, the act of embalming a corpse in the Akan language. Then you look down in ancient Kemet, in the language of ancient Kemet, the deity of embalming is Udushe. And we have that, the Medutu there, that Udushe is the ADURUHYE in Akan, is Udushe, the god of embalming in ancient Kemet. Then Utu, the embalmers, Utu, and so forth. And then we go into some more detailed information with regard to that. And as we show, Udu also means to shoot out fire, to burn, and so forth. Projection of energy. So that's the cosmological foundation. On one hand, we don't decay. When we're slowing down, it's actually a process of crystallization. Even the term kares with the slope, the mound, representing the kus sound, often transliterated as a Q, the R sound, and Medut for the R sound, and then the S, the kares term that's used for the mummified body, the hardened body and so forth, the mummified body, or to make the mummy and so forth, and karest, meaning to make the mummy. Very often people mistranslate that as the origin of the term Christ. They'll say karast or karest is the origin of the term Christ. and in reality, it is not and has never been. The term Keri, Seshta, Keri means he who is above, chief or leader. Seshta means sacred, secret, and so forth, hidden. So Heri Seshta is he who is chief, leader over that which is sacred. That is a title, a priestly title in ancient Kemet. It's also a title given to Heru. Heri Seshta, he who is chief over the mysteries, chief over the divine wisdom, the ancestral wisdom, the sacred ritual practices, and so forth. That is a form of priesthood, priestesshood. Keri Seshta was corrupted by the whites and their offspring into Keri Seshtos, Kerishtos, Keristos, Christus, and later Christ. That's where the corrupt term Christ comes from. It is a corruption of Heri Seshta, is a title of priesthood in ancient Kemet. And of course, Jesus is a fictional cartoon character who never existed. Yeshua never existed. Yeshua ben Pandera never existed. All of that. And we dealt with that in detail in the Continuum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction. The term Kares, with a QRS or KRS, and also KRST, that is the origin actually of the term Karust, like crust or incrustation. It's also the root of the term Kares or crystal. This is why it's used for the term Kares, meaning the mummy, the hardened body. That is the root term. The term Kares meaning encrusted or hardened or crust, and crustal or crystal, later in European languages, that goes all the way back to the term Karas. That's the origin of it. So it has nothing to do with Christ. That's a mistranslation. Some of our people read, for example, from Gerald Massey, the European, writing the Book of the Beginnings and the Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, and so forth. And he said Karas means to, make the mummy, which of course it does. But then he assumed that was the origin of the term Christ. Then our people just repeated that and ran with it and started utilizing that terminology in books and teachings and everything else, and it's always been inaccurate. So, but when you understand the cosmology, you would understand it. This is why it's key to not only try to read the language, but understand the cosmological foundation that undergirds the language. When you understand the cosmology and the ritual practice, which the cosmology reflects, you could not make that mistake with the term karas. When you see the body being karas and the hardening of the body and the mummification, you know instantaneously what's being talked about. You know it has nothing to do with Christ or Heri Seshta or priestly function as the title of a priest or priestess. You know karas meaning the hardening of the body is directly related to the incrustation or the hardening of that entity so that it can become a crystal, crystallized as a shrine, as a hoodoo talisman, a big hoodoo talisman, utilized to communicate with that ancestral spirit so that you can be guided by that ancestor or ancestress once they make their transition, so you can magnify their energy and draw them to that space in a ritual capacity and so forth. We've always engaged that process in ancient Kemet, on the continent of Afuraitkaitnut, thousands of years later, and into the Hoodoo, Juju, Yoruba, and various traditions all over the Western Hemisphere. Now, we're going to get into some of the origins of this practice. You go to our book, Kemet, Hina Ntoro, The Black Nation and Divinity. You look at page 16 in the book. And we were talking about a number of different things. We were talking about Kemet and the term Kam meaning black and so forth. But then we get into this information about the crocodile. It's called Odenchem. One of the Ebeo proverbs associated with the crocodile, the Odenchem, is Odenchem da Nsiomu, Danso Mframa. The crocodile lives in water but breathes air. The crocodile swims with his nose, eyes, and tail above water, while the rest of his body is submerged. He lives in the water but breathes air, meaning he knows instinctively that he cannot function, breathe in the same manner as those who are in his present environment, fish. If he did so, he would drown. If he attempted to breathe underwater like the fish do, he's surrounded by fish, he's in the water, if he didn't know who he was and he was trying to imitate the larger culture that he's in the midst of, and starts to imitate their way of life, their culture, he would try to breathe underwater and he would drown. The crocodile must come out of the water to breathe and thus sustain his life, drawing from the air and the energy of the Aten, the sun. As the crocodile emerges from the flood water, the first sight of him appears to be the emergence of a black mound from the waters, because first just the nose and the eyes and the top of the head rise up from the waters. This is the emergence of the Kam, the black land from the waters of the flood, and this is why there's an association of the primordial crocodile emerging from the primordial flood waters, just like the black land, the raised land rising up from the primordial waters at the beginning of creation. The crocodile deity Sobek carries the body of Alsar, Kam, or the black one, out of the water after the drowning, the flooding. And we show that image of Alsar's body being carried on the back of Sobek. The emergence of the crocodile from the depths of the water is the emergence of the black land, Kemet, the primordial mound at the beginning of creation, and from the flood waters after the inundation. The black and greenish color of the crocodile references the black and green sacred colors of Alsar, the black soil giving birth to green vegetation, based upon the fire within the Kam or the Jam, as we go talk about in the book The Land, the fire of Ra and Ra'et. Sobek is also called Sobek Ra, showing that he has the fire within. The term Kam, root Kamet, meaning black, based upon the burning of the charcoal, the fire within, as we prove in this book, and also meaning completion, to come to an end, also represented by the crocodile's tail and paw, which is the end of the body from the front to back, and the end of the body from top to bottom, also references the completion, burning, blackening, empowering of a certain phase of the creative and regenerative process. So we show Alsar on the back of Sobek the crocodile, and he's emerging from the flood waters. That's the black one, Kam Ur, on the back of the crocodile, emerging. And we also show, and we also should mention here that when Heru's hands were cut off in his battle with Set and so forth, his hands were cut off and thrown in the water. It was Sobek who went down into the depths of the water to go retrieve the hands of Heru to bring them back. So he not only retrieves Alsar from the waters, he retrieves Heru from the waters. Why is this important? Because you see Sobek as that divinity going under the water. One thing that people do not know is that a couple of things about crocodiles, the Odention. The crocodile can spend over 2 hours underwater. So when the crocodile disappeared, he's going into the underworld. People of ancient Kemet would see this major, huge divinity, this great animal going underwater and not emerge until an hour later or even 2 hours later, and then they emerge from the depths. This is this great spirit going into the depths, no different than Alsar's body, which is submerged and then emerging from the primordial waters, the black soil emerging from the primordial waters. There's another feature of the life of crocodiles, which is also key, and we touched on it before with regard to Hapi, the Nile divinity, and we talk about the river itself going into hibernation, and Hapi having the big round stomach and his chest being flabby and so forth, and that's akin to the Nile River when it goes into hibernation for a while and then for a number of months, and then it floods once again. Hapi goes into hibernation. He swells first. He swells up, just like a bear swells up, eating a great deal of food, and then they go into hibernation. And they're asleep for a number of months, and then because they had eaten so much and taken on so much fat and so forth, their body, while it's in that torpor state, can feed off of those calories based on the fat that they maintain. We talked about that with regard to Hapi, showing that the reason Hapi is shown with the big belly and the large chest, like a fat person, almost looking like breasts and so forth, has nothing to do with him being a transgender, or some of these idiots, the whites in our spring, these bisexuals want to put forth that insanity, and then brainwash pseudo-culturalists, pseudo-linguists, pseudo-spiritualists, not knowing anything about the cosmology of Kemet, never having dealt with Hapi or Set and Hapi met as deities ritually. They don't have any answers for Hapi with quote-unquote breasts and a large stomach. So they go along with what the whites and the offspring say, that the large stomach has to do with pregnancy and the breasts have to do with, fertility, and therefore he's androgynous, and it represents the androgynous nature of the deity. Pure stupidity. But some of these pseudo-Afrocentric, pseudo-African-centered linguists and people claiming to read the Medutu and so forth and knowing about the culture and spiritualists, they will repeat that same misinformation because they know nothing about the cosmology. They know nothing about Hapi going into hibernation, and this is why he has that wide body, just like a bear. In the same process, you have this notion for crocodiles of estivation. And when the bear goes into hibernation, it's cold. They go into hibernation during that cold season, and then they come forward when it starts, warming up. For a crocodile, for example, the so-called Nile crocodile, they go into what is called estivation. That notion of estivation or process of estivation has to do when it becomes very hot and very dry and arid and so forth. Just like bears and many other creatures, crocodiles reduce or minimize their heart rate and sleep through the harsh seasons. The caves dug by the crocodiles along the banks of rivers are cooler than the temperatures on the outside. During estivation, the Nile crocodile takes refuge in caves and reduces its respiration rate to approximately 1 breath per minute. The body temperature drops and the heart rate goes down from 40 beats per minute to less than 5. In this state, the crocodile consumes very little energy, enabling it to survive for more than a year without food. And when you see the Nile crocodiles, the Hapi crocodiles, immerse themselves in the mud along the banks of the river and so forth, and they merge with the mud, and if you just walk by, or you wouldn't even realize that there's a crocodile in the mud because they're not moving. They will stay in that position for months. They can go for months without eating. Here, of course, it says survive more than a year without food. So when it becomes hot, dry, harsh conditions, they have to go into the dry area. They try to cool themselves off by, quote-unquote, burying themselves in the Nile mud, surrounding themselves in that and becoming part of that, and then they become motionless for months at a time. When our people saw that, they saw that origin of that mummification process. The great divinities, animal totem, the crocodile, the great deity Sobek, going into the Nile mud and sand and so forth, and then becoming motionless and becoming, quote-unquote, buried and so forth and not moving for a period. And then once the weather broke, then they re-emerged or, quote-unquote, resurrected. And then, of course, their body with the scales and everything is akin to these mummification wrappings and everything else. And, of course, Sobek is the one, as we said earlier, who goes and retrieves the mummified body of Alsar, going down deep into the waters. They can survive underwater for a couple of hours without re-emerging. Then they come back up and so forth. That's all connected to going down under, going in the underworld and so forth, and resurrecting and returning and so forth. All these different things are associated with the Nile crocodile. But the key is when they go and bury themselves in the mud and sand and so forth and are motionless for months at a time and then come forward and resurrect. So that's this origin, ritually and cosmologically and actually on a mundane level, of us recognizing the reality and the functionality of mummification and seeing the animal totem of the great divinity Sobek engaged in that process, that living process. Then we see, and of course, if we were in North America, we would see bears go through the same process. We would see them go, during the wintertime and go and hibernate and become motionless for a period and then, quote-unquote, resurrect later. But since we were there along the rivers, the banks of the river of Hapi, we saw what was taking place in those harsh conditions when the crocodile buried itself, in the mud and so forth, and engaged that process. And of course, you look in the western portion of the country, you have the Wadi Natron, the Wadi of the Natron salt. This is what is used to mummify people. We'll go to those wadis to get that natron, bring it back to Kemet, utilize that in the mummification process. It's an entire extensive process and so forth, going into the desert regions to get that sacred resource. Now, this comes all the way to the Hoodoo tradition, when we're preserving the physical body of the individual, but we also preserve the physical bodies of animal totems, sacred animal totems of the Abosom, of the divinities. We're going to read something read our blog post dealing with this so you can get a better understanding. So the first major point that we're talking about, this idea of mummification, is really crystallization, the final phase of crystallization, when somebody becomes an elderess, and when they fully slow down to the point they transition, we move forward and continue with that process to crystallize their body ritually to make it a shrine, a greatest magnifier power to draw that ancestral spirit to us when we need to communicate with that ancestor or ancestry. So it's preservation of the body of the shrine, but also communication with the spirit who's connected to that body. That's the divinatory process. Anytime you ask a question, engage in spiritual inquiry, that is oracular divination. So the preservation of the body is directly related to divination. Then we look at this notion of this origin of, mummification, looking at the animal totem of the divinity Sobek, the crocodile, his function in the cosmology, his function in creation, him engaging that natural mummification process through estivation, and we see how that works out. Now we get into the Hoodoo tradition, where we not only mummify the body of the deceased relative for oracular divination, but we also mummify the bodies of animal totems for the same process. Just like in Ancient Kemet, we mummified crocodiles, we mummified cats, mummified these different animals, bulls and so forth. There's a ritual process and a foundation for that, cosmologically. So we're going to talk about AGYENGYENSU, the Dragonfly and Divination in Hoodoo. In the first portion, we talk about, as we have proven in our book, Hoodoo people, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut Africans in North America, Akan, Custodians of Hoodoo from ancient Hoodoo Udunu land, Khanit, Nubia. Hoodoo is Akan Ancestral Religion preserved in the spirit genetic blood circles of our Akan ancestresses and ancestors in North America. The terms Ndu, the Akan terms Ndu, which is Hoodoo, Kanche, which is conjure, Moja, which became Mojo in Hoodoo, Eja, or Japadye became Jat and Jackball in Hoodoo. The Akan term Hinti became Haint in Hoodoo. The Akan term Jo became Shout or Shout in Hoodoo. The Kumfo became Gumfo or Gufa, as in Gufa doctor and Gufa dust. That's the Kumfo healer, Kumfo doctor in Akan, and others. All of these Akan terms are born of the cosmology of Akan ancestral religion and culture. So Hoodoo, conjure, Mojo, Jackball, Haint, Shout, Gufa, all of these are Akan terms. The ritual practices and cosmological knowledge expressed through these terms are proof of this reality. This we have preserved language, culture, and ritual in North America for 3 centuries in our blood circles, using the exact same Akan terms for these various aspects of our culture and ritual practices with full cosmological context intact. Now, in Akan culture, the AGYENGYENSU, the dragonfly, is an Achinebois, or a sacred animal totem. The AGYENGYENSU is one who purifies water. Sometimes in Yonkumpon, which is the creator in the Akan tradition, which is Ra in Ancient Kemet. One of the titles of Ra in Ancient Kemet is Ra Kun. You see that in the Book of the Cow of Heaven. Ra-Ku became Da-Ku and Yang-Ku. And Yang-Ku-Pong is Pong, great Pong, circular, and Ra-Ku or Yang-Ku, the serpent, the great circular serpent. That is what Nankupon or Nyankupon means. And of course, Ra takes the form of the circular serpent in ancient Kemet as Ra-Ku. So, sometimes in Nyankupon or Ra is recognized in the Akan tradition. The creator is recognized as the great AGYENGYENSU, the great dragonfly. Of course, in Yonkumpon is Ra, the creator. In Yonkunton is Ra as the creatress. The Akan term Jane means to be pure, clear, still, of water. To be sincere, to gaze. The term Nsu means water. Also Nsuo, water. The term Jane Jane is a reduplication of Jane. So Jane means pure, clear, still, like still of water, that's still pure, clear water. It also means to be sincere, which is pure and clear, and still it also means to gaze. So the reduplication of Jane, Jane, just it brings a more emphasis to the qualities of purity, clarity, stillness, sincerity, clear gazing. So Su is the title. The one who is pure, Jane, clear, still, sincere, the purifier of the water. The Su, the dragonfly, lives underwater for most of its life, later emerging after its metamorphosis to traverse the sky. The eyes of the Su wrap around its head, giving it a nearly 360-degree view of the world. So if you imagine like a caterpillar spending its life as a land animal and so forth, land insect walking around on trees and so forth, at some point a metamorphosis occurs, and from that land insect, the butterfly emerges and flies away. In the same fashion, the Su starts out as an entity that lives underwater and spends most of its life living underwater. It later emerges after its metamorphosis to traverse the sky. And then when you see, as we show in the image, the eyes of the Su after it's emerged as a dragonfly and so forth to fly away, the eyes wrap around its head, giving it a nearly 360-degree view of the world. As a sacred Achenebois animal totem, Su carries the Tumi, the divine power, the potency, to purify, Jane, make clear, Jane, and make still for sincerity and clarity of gazing, Jane. This is the foundation of the method of ADEBISA divination called water gazing. Going underwater is akin to entering into the spirit realm, just like Sobek going under the water, the Su starting out underwater and so forth. The water is a gateway, is the watery realm. The gateway to the spirit realm is the watery realm. Going under is also related to spirit possession. Moreover, going under is related to initiation, as certain classes of spirits take us underwater to teach Ndu, medicine, Hoodoo, and so forth. You'll find that in the Akan tradition, for example, the Motia, so-called dwarf spirits, take the person ritually underwater, teach them Ndu, teach them medicine, and so forth. But it's not only the Motia who do that. It's also Patrickland Abosom. When you read our story, the children's story, Sankofa Prada Meba, and we talk about the divinity taking the young boy Yaojata under the water to communicate with the divinity, communicate under the water, the river in which the divinity takes a residence. That's part of a ritual process that we experience in the Akan tradition, and that we wrote about it, of course. But part of that process of being taken under the water is an initiatory process that's always been part of our ancestral religious tradition. It has nothing to do with that nonsensical baptism, that foolishness that comes from a corruption of our tradition. When our Sar goes underwater and Sobek goes to retrieve him and bring him back out of the water, this is an ancient tradition. When we go underwater to learn medicine from the Abosom and Nsamanfo and so forth, this is an ancient tradition. So not only is it a gateway to the spirit realm, someone has crossed the river saying they have made their transition, it's a euphemism for that. It also is related to spirit possession, when someone is going under, and then it also has to do with initiation into certain healing practices. Someone becoming a hoodoo man, hoodoo woman, root woman, conjure man, conjure woman, and so forth. These are different aspects of priesthood and priestesshood in the hoodoo tradition. The exact same classes of priesthood and priestesshood in the Akan tradition on the continent we maintain here in North America. So we are not dependent at all on going to anyone on the continent of Afuraitkaitnut to be initiated into priesthood, priestesshoods, and so forth. You're only legitimized in a priestly function or priestessly function through your ancestral blood circle, through those priesthoods and priestesshoods that have been maintained in our blood circles for hundreds of years here in the Western Hemisphere. That's the only legitimate priesthood or priestesshood that you can participate in. Outside of that, anything else is extracurricular. It's nothing more than diplomatic relations with cousins on the continent, just like you're going to visit your cousins in a different state. You engage with them. You can go visit your cousins on the continent of Afuraitkaitnut. You can engage with them and you can learn how they do things there based on their region of the Earth Mother that they are interfacing with, the contemporary expression of ritual practice as is practiced there. You can learn about that in a diplomatic relation kind of fashion from one nation, one Afurakani nation to another. But with regard to legitimate ritual practice, the only people who can show you how to function harmoniously as an Afurakani person who's descendant of those who blended ancestral blood circles in this region of the Earth Mother's body after our forced migration, blended those ancestral blood circles and learned from the Abosom as they manifested in this region of the Earth Mother's body how to interface with them and align with them in this region, and how the Earth Mothers, Asase Afu and Asase Ya, how they showed us to interface with them on this region of her body. And then we took in the plant life, animal life, mineral life for food and medicine, which transformed our physical cells as we consume these products and so forth, including our sperm and ovum cells. So then when we gave birth to children, they're tied to the frequency of energy manifest in this region of the Earth Mother's body. Only the people who learn how to navigate their way through life in this region, connected to the Abosom as they manifest in this region, can show you, as part of that clan, how to operate in this region. Nobody from the continent or the Caribbean or anywhere else can show you how to function as an Akan person, a Yoruba person, Juju person, Hoodoo person, and so forth in this region. Only the people who are part of your direct spirit genetic blood circle can show you that, and only they can transmit to me the divine power of the Abosom as it comes through the clan at the specific frequency of this region of the Earth Mother's body. So we can only be legitimized in priesthood and priestesshood through our blood circle. That's very key, and that's, of course, directly related to AKYISAN Ancestral Religious Reversion. Now, which our conference is coming up in March, 3rd annual. So, but going back to that piece, going underwater is akin to entering into the spirit realm, as its gateway is the watery realm. Going under is also related to spirit possession. Moreover, going under is related to initiation, as certain classes of spirits take us underwater to teach Hindu medicine, Hoodoo. Now, the next piece says we must be still, Jane, so that we can clearly see, Jane, a panoramic view, and therefore convey to querents of the oracle what the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo deities and spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors are showing us in the divinatory process for the purposes of healing and protection. In Yompopon, Ra is shown in ancient Kemet to sail in the night boat of the Aten, the sun, in the underworld for the 12 hours of the night, and to later emerge at sunrise to traverse the sky in the day boat of the Aten, the sun, it mirrors the submergence of AGYENGYENSU, the dragonfly, for introspection, that's the night underworld, and emergence for purification, clarity, shining light, that's the day or the sky, on circumstances and events that were unclear to querents of the oracle. The body of AGYENGYENSU, the dragonfly, this sacred animal totem, is dried out and placed on the Nkombre, the shrine of the water gazer for divination in the Hoodoo tradition. This drying out of the body of the insect, this is literally a mummification process preserved in Hoodoo and is directly derived of the mummiform manifestation of Ra, in Yonkumpon, the great AGYENGYENSU, as he is preserved and impenetrable in the sacred white bandages cloth while performing his functions of regeneration night and illumination day. You'll see Ra sitting in the boat of the sun, and his body from the neck down is shrouded in white, a mummified body as the head of a falcon. The Abosom and Nananom Nsumanfo deities and ancestral spirits speak directly through their totemic messengers, the AGYENGYENSU, the dragonflies, when they send them to show up at critical junctures in our lives. They speak to and guide our children as well as adults. AGYENGYENSU, the dragonfly, is an Achinebois, animal totem for specific blood circles in Akan culture, of course on the continent, and these ancestral clans have been preserved, unbroken, in authentic Hoodoo in North America. Those who approach ADEBISA divination through water gazing are often those children of the clans who carry this Achinebois, this totem. They're not the only ones, but they often are connected to that, because AGYENGYENSU is the one who purifies Jane, the Nsu, the water, for purity, for clarity, for stillness, for gazing and so forth. Is directly related to water gazing, peering into that water, the gateway to the ancestral realm, as we talked about in our broadcast and article, to Huti, the male deity Ma'al, in divination from Kemet to Hoodoo, when the assistant Huti, the deity Ma'al, in the form of the sacred monkey animal totem, is proffering the eye of Heru, and that eye is a divination instrument. It's also shown, as a sister posted or sent us a link to another version of that, where the same monkey is proffering the eye of Heru inside of a bowl, inside of the vessel, or sometimes just holding the bowl. And of course, we show that that same monkey holding the divination bowl in the Akan tradition is the assistant of the Abosom Fo, the high priest. In the Hoodoo tradition, we have that same monkey, or sometimes in the form of a male sculpture figure, and the divination bowl with the water on our shrines, and we engage that water divination and so forth, that water gazing. That's all connected. So, AGYENGYENSU is the purifier of the water. We peer into that divination vessel, peer into the water after it's ritualized and so forth, and then we are taken into the ancestral realm, the spirit realm, so we can see the Abosom, see the Nananom Nsumanfo, learn directly from them what's going on in the lives of the individual, and then provide that remedy and show them what needs to be done. And of course, we always remind the people, the whites and offspring are racially, spiritually, incapable of connecting with any Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, Ntorotu, and are incapable of participating in Hoodoo or any other Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Ancestral Religious practice in North America or anywhere in the world without exception. All who claim otherwise are frauds. That means white Europeans, white Americans, white Hindus, white Arabs, white Latinos, white Hispanics, white Asians, white pseudo-Native Americans, and so forth. These are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African black traditions only. The Abosom possess and communicate with our people only. Okay, and then we also show, and that's the end of that particular article. We also talk about that these are themes that will be addressed in our upcoming documentary film. We show the link here in this article. Our film, Amarukafo ADEBISA Ajumadi, African American Ancestral Divination Project. This is the film that some of you know about that we've been working on. We are in the midst of, in fact, we're coming up on 1 year with regard to the anniversary of our crowdfunding effort for the film. We're at about 48%, and we would like to get, of course, to 100%. We've had about 95 contributors so far to get us to that 48%. So when you look on the site, you'll see a link to that. We want to say yedase to those who've contributed even recently the past couple of days. Once we get to our funding goal, we're at 48% now with 95 people. Once we get to our funding goal, we can complete the film in about 30 days. We would like to complete it as soon as possible before the beginning of spring and so forth. So if you support the work that we are doing, please contribute to that crowdfunding effort. We have enough people right on our Blog Talk Radio channel following us on Blog Talk to reach that goal instantly, within a day. So please contribute if you have not had a chance to contribute, and of course you can receive one or more of our books in return for your contribution to our crowdfunding effort for our film. And you can watch the 9-minute trailer for the film. You'll see information about the film and so forth and what we're going to be dealing with. We'll put the link in the chat room right quick for that, for those who are unaware. Put that in the chat room right now. All right, if you have any questions or comments on any of this information, you can hit the number 1 on the phone line, or you can post information in the chat room regarding that. But that's the key points to take away with regard to ADURUHYE, ADEBISA, Mummification and Divination. First and foremost, we don't decay. We begin to crystallize. When we're living in harmony with order, then we begin to crystallize. Of course, if we're living out of harmony with order, then decay does take place. But our natural life cycle is that birth, growth, development, full flowering, and then that slowing down to the point where we begin to crystallize, become elders and eldresses, but then we become ancestresses and ancestors. Then that body is preserved, it is crystallized, mummified, and used as a magnifier for the energy of the ancestor or ancestress, the greatest shrine for that individual, and we magnify the energy of that individual through that ritual process. So we communicate with them through divination, but that mummification process, that's the key there. We also do the same thing, however, with not only our deceased relatives, but also with the Achinebois, the sacred animal totems of the Abosom and the ancestral clans of the Nananom and Samanfo, purifying them, drying them out, and so forth. You learn about Hoodoo, where people use lizards, dry out a lizard or dry out a frog, and they may have a lizard or a frog in their pocket and so forth, or a snake, rattlesnake, or some other form of snake and so forth, using them as animal totems. These are shrines, living shrines. Well, they're living shrines, but the physical body is the magnifier, and they become a living shrine for the spirit of that divinity that governs that animal totem and so forth, and we utilize that to communicate for protection, for healing, and so forth. And we do that in the Hoodoo tradition by drying out the body, placing that shrine, that quote-unquote body, which becomes a shrine, on the shrine of the divinity for divination, for ritual purposes, protection, healing, and so forth. And we see, give me 1 second. Okay, we have a call on the phone line. I mean, 2 on the phone line.
Kwesi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. One question. In mummification, and I missed partial of the broadcast. Today, if say somebody passed away, do anybody in our people today that even still engage in mummification of anybody? Let's say here in North America. I can't speak outside North America, but anywhere that's still practicing this practice?
Well, the way it's being done here is just regular embalming. They're not necessarily, using bandages and so forth, but they're using embalming fluid and, the whole process now preserving the body to a certain extent. It's not as extensive as it was, of course, in ancient Kemet. Of course, it was so extensive there that thousands of years later, people can still unwrap the mummified body and it's still preserved. It's still a crystal, it's still a shrine for the ancestral spirits connected with, or spirit that's connected with the body. Of course, here the embalming process is not as extensive, and of course it will not be as lasting, but that's the process that happens here.
So, in regards to the embalming process, and this body is preserved, so the spirit can come back into this shell. How would the same spirit go into a new body if the shell still exists? How would that work?
The spirit wouldn't go back to the new shell. It's no different than having, say you have a sculpture or a painting or a photograph of a deceased relative on your shrine. That form that's in the photograph, the image of them, that's an actual luminous image of the person. So it's a magnet for the spirit of the individual because that's the form that they used to dwell in. But a more powerful magnet would be the preservation of the body itself. It's just a magnet to intensify and magnify the energy of the ancestral spirit. They're not going to take up residence in the body again. It's just a magnet to draw them to the ritual space to communicate with the people. So they'll show up at the ritual space, and it's a strong magnet for them, and it's more intensive than, say, a sculpture or a picture. Even though you can use a sculpture or a picture, that is a magnet as well, but the strongest magnet, of course, is the body itself. So this is why we preserve the bodies and bury them in cemeteries, and when we go pour libation, we will go right outside where the cemetery is, where the person is buried, and pour libation right there, because their body is buried under the ground right there, and it's a magnifying force. And then when people are engaged in ritual in that space, and that energy is evoked, even people who are not very receptive as other people, they're even impacted because the magnification of the energy is so powerful. So that's why we began to practice. Now, of course, some of our people have fallen away from that kind of practice and fallen away from ancestral communication and so forth, and people are starting to get back into it. But that's the root of the practice.
Okay. All right, it answered all my questions. Madase, thank you again.
Okay. Yeah, we appreciate the call. Okay, Mitia, on the phone line, number 8162, you got a question or a comment?
What's up, Brother Quasi?
What's up?
How does reincarnation play into this? Like, you take someone that became a nana, let's just say, during some period during ancient Kemet. And then over time, they reincarnate. But, like, for instance, let's say that someone from that time has been venerated all the way up until now, and they're still being invoked. But, of course, I'm sure through that time frame from then to now, they've reincarnated several times. So if you're invoking someone that may be alive and, reincarnated now, how does that work?
Right. So, and that's a good question. So this is why it's important, like, for example, when people are growing up in the tradition or when people are restoring the tradition. For example, in a family, when the children are younger, if the parents or if you have grandparents who are involved in tradition, the grandparents, but say you don't have grandparents involved in tradition, the parents are the ones who are, of course, taking the children to the ancestral shrine. It's the parents who are engaged in the evocatory process, evoking the ancestresses and ancestors on a regular basis during ancestral communication and celebrations and observances and so forth. Outside of family rituals, the males as well as the female are evoking their people at the shrine. So when you develop that kind of relationship, the Nsamanfo will let you know if someone has reincarnated or not, and who not to venerate. So we don't just venerate everybody and just keep, have a list of names and so forth. We venerate those who are on the other side, those who are engaged in the ritual process on a regular basis. And we have certain people who are Hoodoo men, Hoodoo women, root men, root women, and so forth, the ones who are receptive and can see clairvoyantly the ancestral spirits or hear them and so forth. They're not just saying names, they can see them, hear them, experience them. And the Nsamanfo will let them know if this individual has, not only if this individual has reincarnated, but who they are. So we would no longer evoke somebody who has returned. So, yes, that's an important distinction. When people are engaged in the process and they can see ancestral spirits walking around, they know who's here, they know who is an ancestor because they can see them. They're not just saying names. Like you see some people say, hey, when you get involved in tradition and you set up an ancestral shrine, write down the names of all your ancestors and evoke them. People can start off doing that, but at some point you start having a relationship directly with the great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers and so forth. They will let you know if somebody has left their ranks and has returned to the physical world. And, of course, you wouldn't evoke them because they're walking around, they're living. And if they, once they make their transition, then, they're back in the ancestral realm. That also goes back to this notion, and the previous caller asked about the physical body being preserved. When we evoke the ancestresses and ancestors, it's not that they take up residence in the physical body. They're not trapped, by that physical body, nor are they trapped by an image on the shrine or anything like that. It's just a magnet for them. But those physical bodies, when they are preserved, one of the reasons why we would, especially black people from America, travel to the continent of Afuraitkaitnut is not just to, communicate with our cousins, distant cousins who live there and meet them and all of that, but it's to go back to the village or villages where we used to live when we were living there in a previous incarnation. Go back to the place where our bodies are buried, the bodies we used to live in when we were living on the continent. And we go back to those spaces and engage in ritual practice because those bodies are buried there. That's an experience that nobody from the continent is even thinking about because they live in their space and so forth. But for us over here, we have a different reason for going back to find the villages we used to live in and the bodies that we used to inhabit that are buried there and then reconnect on another level. So that's a totally different thing that's unique to us over here when we reconnect on the continent. But it's all inclusive in this whole notion of, the preservation of the bodies and so forth. But to answer your question, yes, you don't evoke somebody who's returned and who's walking around. But when you have a relationship with the Nsamanfo, a direct relationship, they will let you know which of their colleagues have left the ancestral realm and have returned to the physical realm, and you will not, of course, include them.
Okay. Now, with that, they would be known as someone different when they come back to a different group of people, right?
Yes. So say if it was if people were calling on, in fact, you yourself, prior to you entering into the mother's womb, you were an ancestor. If people were involved in the tradition, say they had never left the tradition, they were involved in the tradition, everybody in the family was, they would have been evoking you and pouring libation to you for a long time, and then all of a sudden now you are like coming into the physical world and you're drawn into your mother's womb and you were born a few decades ago. So now those people who used to call on you, they can't call on you anymore because you're here now. In fact, we gave an example of how this works out. One of the sisters that we know, that you know as well, she talked about how when she was about to conceive, or prior to her conception, the ancestress who was going to come forward and become, her daughter, communicated with her and let her know that she was returning. She also let her know and told her what her name needed to be. So eventually the sister, she conceived, and she knew immediately that she had conceived right away. And she knew that spirit that had communicated with her was now inside of her womb. And when the girl was born, she gave her the name that she, the young baby, the infant, had told her to give her before she entered into the womb. And she has that name now. So, and of course, this sister's here. So here, born and raised here in North America. So that's part of the ancestral tradition. That's part of their clan tradition. So she will know, and she will tell everybody, hey, this right here, this is the ancestors we used to communicate with, but now she has returned. So, of course, we don't include her in libation anymore because she's here now. Then, of course, older people, elderses, when a child is born, those who are receptive, they can look at the child when they come out the womb and tell you exactly which great-great-great-great-grandparent this child is, if it was one who had returned, who had lived like 120 years ago or something like that, and was coming back. And somebody in their, some grandmother, grandfather in their 90s, they could tell you, oh, this is so-and-so. Now, you may give them a new name because it's a new condition and so forth, but they know exactly who this individual is. So that's always been part of our tradition. We make distinctions about who's coming back, who's who. We find out who's who, and we let the community know.
Ashe. What I say?
Okay. Any I say that. Appreciate the call. Okay, so we just want to make sure we don't have any questions in the chat room. All right, so we can end the broadcast here. Well, we have one more question. Hold on 1 second. Michio on the phone line. You had a question or comment, number 0217.
Good night, Brother Quasi. My question was, I missed the initial portion of your broadcast. I was trying to get what is the process for Africans, upon death? Because you hear so many different things. People tell you, well, if you're not worshiping the sun, that your spirit will go here or go there. I mean, but what is the process?
What that last part you said? Did you say what is the process?
Yes, for the spirit of the African.
You mean what happens once the spirit leaves the body?
Right.
Okay, so for us, and this, of course, comes directly from us interfacing with these Nsamanfo who become Nsamanfo when they transition. So when they transition, of course, the first thing that happens, very often the people who are still living in the family, very often here, most people are not involved in ancestral religion. So they're just upset and they're, crying out. You may have one or two people who are kind of receptive, but the newly discarnate spirits, discarnate meaning they're outside of the carnal body, discarnate now, disembodied spirits, they're still spending time and magnetically drawn to those family members who still have that magnetic pull and desire for that spirit to be around. So they're still drawn into the orbit of the loved ones. So they're hanging around the loved ones and they see them crying and everything else. They may visit them in a dream or show up in the house and try to communicate or whatever, and a lot of the people are not paying attention. Maybe one or two might pay attention and so forth. They are engaged in that kind of process for a number of days. Eventually, people have a funeral. They do what they do. Very often they have a funeral based on a pseudo-religion, which is absolutely meaningless. But people who are actually, receptive, they communicate with that deceased spirit. Sometimes they'll, set out an offering for them. light candle for them and sit down and communicate with them. And that spirit begins to make adjustments. Because after the funeral, even though the funeral is meaningless because the pseudo-religious practice means nothing. Once the body of the individual is buried, then a lot of the people start trying to make that adjustment and begin to adjust their lives in this new condition where this person is no longer physically around. They start trying to move forward. So then that spirit, even though it's been hanging around a lot of the loved ones and hanging around that space, that spirit has to begin to make that adjustment as well. A real funerary practice acknowledges the existence of the spirit, communicates with him or her, starts making that progress towards, listen, we have a new relationship now. You were here, now you're in the spirit realm. The new condition is you're going to spend the majority of your time with the other ancestresses and ancestors, and periodically you'll come back with us through spirit possession or spirit communication, interface with us sometimes, but you're going to spend most of your time in the ancestral community. And that spirit has to recognize that there's a shift, just like they used to live here on earth, and then every now and then they engage in spirit communication with the ancestresses and ancestors. Now it's flipped. Now they're going to spend most of their time with the ancestral community and every now and then communicate with the living family. They have to make that adjustment. If we're engaged in ritual practice, that adjustment is a little bit easier because we go through a ritual process to help propel them and give them that kind of energy to, break free from that, sadness and everything else. And we've talked about in the previous broadcast how Heru Afia is one of the first abosom they see in the western region and, in the ancestral realm at the gateway, the divinity of Nefet, beauty and so forth, because she helps to recalibrate them. That radiant energy, that radiant beauty helps to harmonize the person to their new condition. That's one of the reasons she's the first divinity you see. And she's directed to be there by Ra and Ra'et to receive the newly discarnate spirit. And that helps to recalibrate somebody. That radiant beauty helps to bring some harmony to a situation where the spirit was depressed and sad and everything else. So, but then they begin to make that transition to go to the ancestral community and dwell there basically permanently with every now and then a foray into the physical world, ritually. If they were engaged in regular, normal behavior while they were here, then that transition is a little bit easier because they have other Nsamanfo helping, guiding them to that place, and they're not pulled in different directions by other discarnate spirits who are just hanging out, who are criminal and weak and can't be seated in the ancestral realm and trying to pull on them. They can, go through all of that and get to that ancestral realm and become seated, well-grounded, and so forth. For those who are not, they can be pulled in different directions and remain earthbound and hanging around the house they died or hanging around the place where they were murdered, and they'll hang out there for 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, still going through, spiritual discordance until they, do something about it. But typically the majority of our people end up going to dwell with the ancestral community, and they further their development, growth and development, living amongst the ancestral community just like we live amongst our community here. So that's the process, and they typically become, like in our tradition, they become fully grounded around a year after. It's like someone moving into a new house, but then they don't become settled until that 1 year anniversary. So that's the process.
Okay. Now, so you're saying that those of us that are living can help that process by interceding for them by way of, I'm not sure if I'm using the correct terms, by way of prayers and like libation and stuff like that?
Yes, but now we wouldn't say to necessarily interceding. We can participate and we can be helpful, but when it comes to growth and development and spiritual cultivation, it is always first and foremost the responsibility of the individual. Whether they're in the physical world or when they make their transition, they're still responsible for their own spiritual development. Now, you can assist and participate with the person as they're going through that process, But just like here, somebody's not willing to say something, you're responsible for your own physical health. So you exercise and get enough sleep and eat right and everything else, and reduce, stress by learning how to deal with situations in a harmonious way and not being controlled by them. But if you're not willing to do that, somebody can try to get you to work out or get you to exercise or get you to eat the right foods and everything else. They could try to assist, but at some point you're going to have to take the lead and do the work yourself. And, you can get some assistance from people, but you have to do the work yourself. It's the same thing with the discarnate spirit. They have to make that decision because they have a kayat. They have to align with their ka or kayat. And then we can, engage in ritual prayer to project some energy to help move it along. But we're not the source of that energy. The source of the energy they have to overcome any condition that's negative or discordant is that Ba, that divine living energy that's placed within their spirit bodies, that radiant energy that they have. They have access to that. It's their responsibility to utilize it. We can project some energy to help them in that process, but they have to affect that process as well. So it's a communal effort led by the individual.
It's just that my concern is that given that the majority of people are not participating in the ancestral culture and worship, my question always is how would they know or come to a recognition that this is what they are supposed to be doing?
You mean how would the deceased individual come to that recognition?
Yes.
Well, they also have some assistance because a lot of our people here are not involved in culture, so we wouldn't be engaged in an intelligent funerary ritual process that first acknowledges and identifies the spirit and has somebody who's receptive, one or more people, to communicate directly with them, to talk directly with them. Our people are too busy ignoring them and singing songs and everything else. But they do have assistance from the other side, the community of ancestors and ancestors who are already in the spirit realm. They assist the individual because many of us are not. They also have the Abosom who empower them as well. So it's still a communal effort. It should be balanced. It should be the Nsamafo on the other side assisting them in that condition and us on this side letting them know that it's time to move forward. If we're going to have a new relationship, you're going to spend most of your time over there and sometimes connect here, and we're acknowledging the new relationship that we're going to have with you, and you should be acknowledging it as well and not trying to hold on to being here. But then there should be a balance between us doing that and the ancestral community on the other side helping them get acclimated to their new, place of residence. But very often it's lopsided towards the ancestral community on the other side, assisting them, and then a handful of people here, one or two people here or a few more that are receptive, and everybody else is not paying attention. But that's part of that struggle. So the people who are receptive, well, then we just have more responsibility because some people are not. It's just like people who are, if you have people who are trying to work and maintain and, develop a family, and then you have some people who are doing drugs and so forth, somebody else has to take a greater load to make sure the children are all right and everything else until you get more people who are, working on self-development, cleaning themselves up. So that's part of this process. This is one of the reasons we have to engage the process of AKYISAN, Ancestral Religious Reversion, to get our people reverting back to our original ancestrally inherited religious practice. So this backlog of individuals who are discarnate and going through a great deal of discordance because they didn't have any kind of communal assistance ritually, so they won't keep going through that. Because when you have people who are discarnate who are earthbound, they cause a great deal of problems for people, in the physical world. Stress, sometimes physical illnesses, problems with finances or relationships and decision-making and so forth, and you'll find that people are making bad decisions, and sometimes it's them themselves Sometimes they are receptive to discarnate spirits who are dysfunctional and disharmonious, and they're urged to make certain bad decisions or influence, and then they make these bad decisions and things just keep, falling apart in their lives, situation after situation. And somebody who's receptive can see, okay, it's not only you making bad decisions or being immature. In addition to that, you have some help. There's somebody outside of you, influencing foolish ideas and foolish behavior and self-destructive behavior because they're going through their own spiritual discord. But that's all part of the reason why we need to reestablish our tradition.
I've had a colleague tell me that she was taken into the ancestral realm, but when she requested to see some of her loved ones, she was informed that because they were Christian, that she couldn't go to where they were or couldn't make contact with them.
Well, you said because she was what?
Right. She said that this is someone that told me that they're involved in African ancestral practices. She said that she was taken into the ancestral room, and when she asked to see one of her deceased relatives, she was told that she could not make contact with them because that person was a Christian.
She couldn't make contact with a deceased relative?
Right.
Because the deceased relative was a Christian? That's what they said?
Right. Because the deceased relative was a Christian. I guess as of that point in time, that person still was did not make a conversion to ancestral religion.
So you're saying that the deceased relative was still, were they trying to say the deceased relative was still operating like a Christian?
Exactly.
I'm not sure what they were trying to convey. Of course, anybody, like our people who are Christians and devout Christians and everything else, when they make their transition, now they are actually in the space that they have been reading about their entire lives. About, when they die and they go to heaven and all this other stuff. Right. Now they're actually there, and they know instantaneously that Christianity and Islam and all that other garbage is a lie because Jesus is not over there because he don't exist, Muhammad don't exist, and none of them existed. So the person is not still a Christian because there's no Jesus over there, and they know that because they're there. It's no longer has anything to do with belief. They know the little cracker and character is not there. So it's possible that the person, was depressed and upset and, doing whatever and, earthbound and not, harmonious function. Okay. But they're not still believing in Jesus because Jesus don't exist and they're right there in the place. There's no longer a belief there in the spot right now. So, but the key is, people need to do ritual practice themselves, and they need to be able to confirm who's speaking. That's why consistent ritual practice is key. To know what ancestral spirits are speaking. Are they your deceased relatives? Is it some discarnate individuals who are not related, who are giving misinformation? Because that happens as well. So we have to be consistent with our own practice. When people start saying different things and saying this is what this person said and this is what that person said, ultimately all of that is irrelevant. The only thing that's important is what your own people say, and the only way you can verify that is through consistent ritual practice. People feeding out, what their beliefs are, what they think somebody said, or what may have happened, and that's irrelevant to us. When you engage in your own ritual practice and you become grounded in that, then nobody can tell you what's what because you know what's what. So that's the key.
Okay. No, it's just that religious groups, even though they're not, I think, fully ancestral, participate in what they call, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, like they call them spiritual churches. They do, some of them call it fasting, some of them call it mourning, where they take you into the ancestral realm and you see your relatives and things like that. So people that have undergone that experience, at times I question them about what it is, and one of them told me about that.
Okay. So as long as, this is the thing, as long as somebody, if they're still utilizing some form of Eurocentric pseudo-spirituality mixed with, what we're doing,
right,
then they're going to draw in disordered spirits within their own clan, as well as open the door for other discarnate spirits of non-relatives, which will influence, their practice. And some of them are in spiritualist churches, or you see people talking about Shango Baptists and stuff like that.
Right. Those
types
of
ancestor. Right, so they set up ancestor tables and so forth, but then they have this nonsense about all nations tables, and they're pouring libation and including not only their actual black Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestresses and ancestors, but then they're pouring libation to pseudo-Native Americans and Hindus and other Asians and all this other nonsense. Then they're inviting parasites who are not their real relatives. Even though they polluted their blood circle, that's not your relative. That's an invader. That's a criminal. So they're not your ancestral, spirit, genetic ancestresses and ancestors. They were invaders. They just polluted the blood circle for temporarily. They died. You don't evoke these criminals calling them your family, because that's opening up some parasites to come in and lie and misinform and influence you in another direction. And that's repulsive to the Nsamanfo, because you're still trying to include these criminals into, the community which they're not part of. So as long as you're doing that, you're repulsive to the larger ancestral community. You have to leave these criminals alone. Just like if you try to bring some heroin addicts, 5 or 6 heroin addicts to your grandparents' house and say, let us come in and sit down and talk, they're not going to allow you in the house until you get rid of the heroin addicts. They're not entertaining that at all. And if you say, well, I'm not going to leave the heroin addicts alone, then they're not letting you in the house either. They're going to leave you out with the heroin addicts. And it's the same thing with people who transition. If they're still trying to pour libation and communicate with deceased cracker spirits, then the larger ancestral community is not going to allow them to dwell with them, period. So until they get rid of that, they're going to be on the outside. It's still going to be earthbound.
Well, thank you for answering my question, Medase.
Okay. Yeah, I'll say that. We appreciate the call. Okay, so we want to make sure, give me 1 second right quick. I want to make sure we have this information in here. Okay. So, we just wanted to post this information in the chat room. All right. So, what we posted in the chat room is a link. So, once again, we are moving towards the 100% mark. We want to achieve that. In fact, it's 1 year. It's like next week is a year that we've had our crowdfunding effort up. Again, we've had 95 people contribute, and some people have contributed a couple of times, and that's why I said it's about 163 contributions, because a number of people contributed twice or 2 or 3 times. So that's why it's 95 people but 163 contributions. So if we can get just the people who are listening to our broadcast to make a contribution, that's enough right there to literally get us to the 100% mark. We can get our film in the post-production phase, and we can have our film released in an over 30-day period. We'll be able to complete that process, complete that filming process. So if you appreciate the information we have put forward, show that appreciation by starving the beast and feeding the pride, as we talk about in our calm economic development model. The funds you would have potentially given to a white business organization or institution tomorrow, whether it was, some restaurant or something else, starving the beast and feeding the pride, reallocating funds from the white business to the black business, that allows us to, reach that goal, so then we can put forth a film which will impact our people on a larger scale. Some people listen to broadcasts, some people read books, but once we have the visual out, the actual film, and we began to screen the film all over the country in different parts of the world where our people have asked us to come out, then we'll be able to impact our people on a larger scale, including this movement towards AKYISAN Ancestral Religious Reversion. We also posted the link to the AKYISAN conference, our third annual conference, Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference here in Washington, D.C. will be the weekend of March 24th. And we have a fundraising campaign for that to cover expenses for the out-of-town presenters, as well as the venue expense and the free book giveaway. Of course, the conference is free admission, as all of our conferences are, and we'll be giving away a free copy of our newly released AKYISAN book on the day of the conference to everybody who attends, and we've done that for all of our conferences and all of our presentations everywhere we go in the country. So in order to continue that process of the free conferences and the free books to all attendees, we need some assistance. We've always, paid out of pocket for that with assistance from a few key people. We have literally thousands of people who download our books on a monthly basis, about 4,000 books per month. We just posted a piece showing that 55,000 books have been downloaded over the past 12 months of our free ebooks. So we have people who are tuning in and getting information and sharing information. So we need those people. If you haven't had a chance to contribute to one of those efforts, please do so today, and we can get everything done in a rapid fashion. We can get the film finished and begin to spread that information, spread that consciousness of ancestral religious reversion on a much wider scale. So, yet I'll say for those who have contributed, take 2 or 3 minutes if you have a chance. For those who have not yet done so, to contribute, it's fundraiser.com, fundrazr.com/AmaduKafo_ADEBISA, as well as the AKYISAN_reversion. You'll see the links on our page, in the chat room, on our publications page, on our website, on Facebook, and so forth, wherever we're at. If you have any questions or comments, of course, please, just let us know. And once again, we have a couple of spaces left for next month's retreat in South Carolina. So contact us, or just go to the Happy Merit page, the Happy Merit retreat page, if you would like to take those 2 spaces, and let us know if you have any questions. So, yet I say thank you for tuning into the broadcast, and Yebesha Bio, we will meet again. That's up.